On a snowy evening in a small town, Donald Trump steps into a humble diner for a quiet meal. What starts as an ordinary visit quickly turns into a life-changing moment for a hardworking chef. You won't believe what happens next. The warm glow of hanging string lights danced off the frost-covered windows of Rosie's Diner, a cozy, family-owned gem nestled in the heart of a snow-blanketed small town. Outside, the wind howled, sweeping snowflakes into swirling patterns. Inside, the world was different. The clink of conversation, the clink of silverware against plates, and the aroma of freshly baked apple pies and sizzling bacon wrapped around every visitor like a comforting hug. Whoa, hang in? I felt like I was wearing a thin fanny pack. Maria Gonzalez stood behind the counter, her hands busy whisking eggs in a stainless steel bowl. Her dark brown curls framed her face, dampened by the heat wafting from the stove. Despite the late hour and the aching muscles from a long shift, her smile didn't falter. This diner was her second home and her sanctuary, a place where she poured her heart into every meal she served. Maria was more than just a chef. She was the soul of Rosie's Diner. Regulars loved her sunny demeanor and the way she always remembered their favorite orders. "A stack of pancakes with extra syrup for you, Mr. Larson," she'd say with a wink. Or, "Extra crispy bacon, right, Miss B?" Her kindness made the diner feel less like a business and more like a gathering spot for the community. I loved my guests. I loved the people I met here each and every day. I wanted them to find success, and I hoped that. But beneath her cheerful exterior, Maria carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. As a single mother of two, every dollar earned went toward keeping the lights on, the pantry stocked, and her kids' dreams alive. Her oldest, Alina, dreamed of becoming a doctor. Maria had promised herself she'd find a way to make it happen, no matter how many late nights she worked. I have The diner, however, was struggling. Rising food costs, dwindling customers during the harsh winter, and the competition from a flashy new chain restaurant had taken their toll. Maria had been fighting to keep Rosie's afloat, pouring her savings into repairs and advertising. But the cracks were starting to show. She sighed as she glanced at the specials board, wishing she could offer more than the same staples the locals had grown accustomed to. "I sent you for a massage every day. I got a lot of tattoos. Didn't do my specialist. Brodos in expon salad. See too much shit for Ellison." "Mom, you need a break," came the familiar voice of her youngest, Danny, as he peeked out from the kitchen. He'd been helping wash dishes after school. Maria shook her head. "I'll rest when the bills pay themselves," she replied, forcing a smile. Danny frowned, but didn't argue. He'd seen the late-night worry etched on his mom's face, the bills piled high on their kitchen counter. Still, she never let her struggles dim her spirit. "No, there you go," he said, and headed for the kitchen. That snowy evening, the diner was quieter than usual. A few loyal patrons lingered over coffee and pie, chatting about the weather. Maria wiped her hands on her apron, allowing herself a moment to rest her elbows on the counter. She stared out the frosted window, her mind racing. Could she really keep this place alive? "So, how many years until we sell the farm?" she asked, as the sun cast its light. The sound of the bell above the door snapped her back to reality. A sharp gust of cold air swept in as the door swung open. Maria turned, expecting to greet another regular. Instead, she froze. A man walked in, tall and broad-shouldered, his striking blonde hair and sharp suit catching everyone's attention. His polished black coat brushed against the edges of the tables as he stepped further inside, glancing around the diner. He didn't seem to mind the snowflakes clinging to his shoulders. It was Donald Trump. The room went silent. Conversations ceased. Coffee cups paused mid-air, and every eye turned toward the unexpected guest. Maria's heart raced. She wasn't sure if it was excitement or nerves, but she wiped her hands on her apron and straightened her posture. Trump scanned the room, his sharp eyes settling on Maria. Something about his gaze was less imposing than she'd expected, almost warm. He stepped closer, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. "Hmm. You're Maria?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Yes, sir," Maria replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. He extended a hand, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I've heard about you." Maria blinked, confused but intrigued. What could he possibly have heard about her? This moment, she realized, was about to change everything. The bell above the diner door jingled sharply, cutting through the soft hum of conversation. Heads turned toward the entrance as a figure stepped inside, his presence commanding instant attention. Donald Trump had arrived, flanked by a few aides and security personnel. The glow of the diner's warm lights reflected off his tailored overcoat. His familiar blonde hair rattled, flected off his oversized pink cleavage. Rattled like what you would when you put like a strap or something around your waist. The room seemed to hold its breath. Whispers rippled through the booths, and curious eyes followed his every move. Trump glanced around the modest diner, his expression thoughtful. The rich aroma of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft hum of a jukebox, playing an old Sinatra tune. And so, as you look up, Western Welsh remands, "Looks like the perfect place for a late-night meal," Trump remarked, his deep voice cutting through the murmurs. One of his aides approached the counter to secure a table, while Trump surveyed the room with a casual but discerning gaze. Behind the counter, Maria Gonzalez had her back turned, focused on plating a stack of golden pancakes. She didn't notice the commotion until Danny tugged on her sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, his eyes wide with awe, "you won't believe who just walked in." Maria glanced up, brushing a stray curl from her face. Her brow furrowed slightly as she took in the sight of the unexpected guest. She recognized him immediately, but instead of being starstruck, she felt a surge of determination. Guest or not, her job was to serve good food, and she wasn't about to let exhaustion or nerves stop her. "Oh, all right," she said, her voice steady. "Back to work, Danny. Let's make sure everything's perfect." Trump and his team settled into a booth near the window. Maria wasted no time, her hands moving deftly as she prepared the orders. Despite the long day and the dull ache in her feet, she gave the same care and precision to this meal as she did to every other dish. Her focus was unwavering, her passion shining through in every flip of a pancake and every garnish of fresh herbs. As ever, the discipline made her hands and adult aches, even when she arrived a little early, a little bit late, a couple of hours later than expected. The waitress, a young woman named Julie, delivered the plates to the table with a nervous smile. Trump nodded his thanks, but his attention was drawn to the food. The presentation was simple yet inviting, and the aroma was irresistible. He took a bite of the warm, buttery pancakes and paused, his expression shifting to one of pleasant surprise. "This is incredible," Trump said, leaning back in the booth. His aides nodded in agreement, murmuring their approval. Trump gestured to Julie. "Who's the chef?" Julie hesitated, her eyes darting toward the kitchen. "That would be Maria, sir. She runs the kitchen." "Bring her out," Trump said, his tone firm but kind. "I'd like to meet her." Julie relayed the message, her voice tinged with excitement. Maria, who was wiping down the counter, froze for a moment. Her heart raced, but she quickly composed herself. She wasn't one to seek attention, but she couldn't ignore the request. Taking a deep breath, she removed her apron, smoothed her uniform, and stepped out of the kitchen. Her footsteps were steady, but inside her nerves fluttered. Trump stood as she approached, offering a hand. "Maria, is it?" he asked, his smile warm. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice calm despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. "I have to say," Trump began, his tone genuine, "this is some of the best food I've ever had. You've got a real talent." Maria's cheeks flushed, but she managed to smile. "Thank you. I just do my best to make good food for good people." Trump nodded, clearly impressed by her humility. "Your best is more than enough, Maria. It's exceptional." The room was silent, every patron hanging on the exchange between the chef and the high-profile guest. Maria, though slightly overwhelmed, stood tall, her dedication shining through in her quiet confidence. In that moment, the connection was undeniable. Two people from vastly different worlds, brought together by a shared appreciation for hard work and authenticity. Maria stood by the booth, her hands clasped together to keep them from fidgeting. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in front of someone like Donald Trump. The diner had gone eerily quiet, every pair of eyes fixed on the scene unfolding near the window. "Have a seat, Maria," Trump said, gesturing to the opposite side of the booth. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but it carried the weight of someone used to being listened to. She hesitated, then slid into the seat. "Thank you, sir. I hope everything was to your liking." "To my liking?" Trump leaned forward, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Maria, this was the best meal I've had in weeks. You have a gift." Her cheeks flushed. "That means a lot, sir. I just try to make good food that makes people happy." "Well, you've succeeded." He leaned back, folding his hands. "Tell me about yourself. How long have you been running this place?" Maria took a breath, glancing at the counter where Danny was watching her with wide eyes. "I've been here for 8 years. I started as a waitress, worked my way up to running the kitchen, and eventually took over the diner." Trump nodded, his expression attentive. "And the food. It's more than just a job for you, isn't it?" She smiled softly. "It's my way of connecting with people. Cooking isn't just about feeding someone. It's about bringing them comfort, giving them a little joy in their day. This diner, it's my second home." Trump tilted his head, his gaze sharpening. "That's a lot of heart to put into a business. But it can't always be easy." Maria's smile faltered, her hands tightening on the edge of the table. "It's not," she admitted. "With rising costs and competition from bigger chains, we've been struggling. Some days, I worry if we'll make it through the month." Trump frowned slightly. "You've built something special here, something worth fighting for. Why didn't you give up?" "Because of him," she said, nodding toward Danny, who quickly looked away, pretending to wipe down the counter. "I'm a single mom. Everything I do is for my son. I want him to see that hard work pays off, that no matter how tough things get, you don't, quit." Trump followed her gaze, his expression softening. "He's lucky to have a mom like you." Maria smiled, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'm the lucky one. He's my reason for everything." The conversation paused for a moment, the hum of the diner filling the silence. Trump studied Maria, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he spoke, his tone serious but kind. "Maria, I don't think people like you get enough credit. You're the backbone of this country. People who work hard, who care about what they do, who make a difference, even in small ways." His words caught her off guard. She blinked, unsure how to respond. Thank you, Mr. Trump. That means more than you know." "What's the truth," he said simply. Then, leaning forward, he added, "And let me tell you something, Maria. I've got a feeling things are about to get a lot better for you." Her brow furrowed slightly, a mix of curiosity and disbelief crossing her face. "What do you mean?" Trump smiled, his tone lightening. "Let's just say, I'm not leaving here without doing something to help." Maria's breath hitched, but before she could ask more, Trump gestured toward the counter. "Now, how about we get another cup of that coffee? Best I've had in ages." Maria laughed softly, a spark of hope flickering in her chest. Trump stood from the booth, brushing imaginary crumbs from his jacket. The clinking of cutlery and murmur of conversations around the diner had quieted long ago. Now, every eye was on him, their curiosity palpable. In 1904, Trump stood from the booth, being wheeled into a new twisted form and place in the diner's marble tasting room. He turned to the room, his voice clear and commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to take a moment to say something about the incredible woman running this place." The silence was absolute. Maria froze where she stood, a dish towel clutched in her hand, her heart thundering in her chest. She walked up to her friend Vickery and whispered only a little bit. He giggled back so hard he rolled off him. This diner, Trump continued, gesturing around him, is more than just a spot for great food. It's a symbol of hard work, resilience, and community. And that's all thanks to Maria. He looked over at her, his expression warm and sincere. Uh, Sir, Maria, you have to sit down with me a moment. Yeah, very good. The patrons erupted into applause. A few even whistled. Maria's cheeks burned, and she covered her face for a moment, laughing nervously. Trump wasn't done. He raised his hand, the room falling silent again. You see, Maria here is not just a chef. She's a role model. She's someone who puts everything she has into this place, not just for herself, but for her son and this community. That kind of dedication deserves recognition. What? Maria blinked rapidly, trying to fight the tears welling in her eyes. Her coworkers exchanged excited glances, while Danny stood behind the counter, grinning ear to ear. And that's why, Trump said, pulling out his phone, I'm going to make sure Maria gets the help she deserves. The room buzzed with excitement. Whispers filled the air as patrons leaned in, eager to see what would happen next. Trump tapped a few buttons on his phone, his expression focused. Then he spoke, his voice firm. I want my team here immediately. Maria deserves a chance to make this place even better. We're going to fund renovations, equipment upgrades, whatever she needs to expand her diner and keep serving this community. The room exploded into cheers. Phones were whipped out, cameras flashing as patrons recorded the moment. Maria stood rooted in place, her hands trembling as she tried to process what was happening. And what a lot of people missed or just ignored was that Maria's keys were also in her hands. Mr. Trump, I don't know what to say, she stammered, her voice thick with emotion. You don't have to say anything, he replied, walking over to her. This isn't about me. It's about you and what you've built here. You've earned this. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head in disbelief. This will change everything. Thank you, Mr. Trump. Thank you so much. Trump patted her shoulder, his voice softening. Just promise me you'll keep doing what you're doing. This town needs people like you. Both Mistress Maine looked up, and her eyes were wide. He was holding something. Across the room, Danny cheered loudly, his young voice rising above the clamor. Way to go, Mom! The crowd laughed, their cheers growing louder. Maria glanced at her son, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. By now, the news had spread beyond the diner. Social media posts were already gaining traction, with captions like, Trump changes a chef's life, and incredible moment at the local diner. Outside, a small crowd began to gather, curious about the commotion. Inside, Maria finally let out a breath, the weight of her struggles momentarily lifting. Trump turned back to the diners, his tone lighter. Now I think it's time for dessert. Who's got pie? His face rose in a vicious smile. Laughter rippled through the room as Maria wiped her eyes, nodding at her staff. On the house, she managed to say, her voice cracking. As Trump sat back down, the atmosphere in the diner shifted. What had started as an ordinary night had turned into something extraordinary. A night that none of them would forget. And Ron said, so you're here for, like... Maria stood tall, her heart full, as she watched the man who had just changed her life sip his coffee, smiling like it was just another day. The changes started small, almost imperceptible. A fresh coat of paint on the walls, new gleaming countertops replacing the old scratched ones. But as weeks turned into months, Maria's diner transformed before the eyes of the community. The upgrades brought new life to the place. Modern kitchen equipment allowed the staff to work more efficiently. Comfortable new booths and a brighter, welcoming interior created an atmosphere that drew people in, making them want to stay a little longer. Maria expanded the menu, introducing homemade soups and fresh-baked pastries alongside the classic dishes her regulars loved. By far the funniest thing was that, she claimed to have inherited an old lady's shaving from her regulars. The once cozy diner became a bustling hotspot. Locals raved about the new flavors, and words spread to nearby towns. Soon, families were driving miles just to try Maria's famous apple pie or her hearty breakfast platters. The parking lot, which used to have a few scattered cars, now stayed packed during all hours of the day. Uh, It's like a second home, one customer remarked, sipping a hot cup of coffee. Maria's not just a chef. She's the heart of this place. I rang for my tablet. Maria couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride as she looked around the lively diner. For the first time in years, the financial strain she'd carried on her shoulders was easing. With the funding Trump provided, she was able to hire more staff, giving jobs to people in the community who had been struggling like she once had. You just really proud of you, I think, she said. Among them was a young woman named Carla, a single mother trying to make ends meet. Maria saw herself in Carla and quickly became a mentor. "You've got so much potential," Maria told her one evening as they cleaned up after closing. "Stick with me, and I'll show you how to run a business one day." Maria's newfound confidence extended beyond the diner. She began organizing workshops for other small business owners in town, sharing her story and offering guidance. The local Chamber of Commerce even invited her to speak at events, where she inspired others with her journey of resilience and transformation. Meanwhile, Trump remained involved in Maria's success. True to his word, he stayed in touch, checking in regularly through calls and emails. "How's my favorite chef doing?" he'd ask with a chuckle, genuinely interested in her progress. He even made a surprise visit one afternoon, walking into the diner unannounced. The room fell silent before erupting into applause. Trump shook hands with customers and took a seat at the counter, ordering a slice of pie. "I told you this place would be a hit," he said, grinning at Maria. Maria smiled back, her heart swelling with gratitude. "It wouldn't have been possible without you, Mr. Trump." "Nonsense," he replied, waving her off. "This was all you. I just gave you a little push." The ripple effect of Trump's gesture extended far beyond the diner. The local economy began to thrive, with Maria's success inspiring other businesses to invest in their growth. The community rallied around her, seeing her as a symbol of what could be achieved with determination and a little help. Maria's story gained attention far and wide. News outlets covered her transformation, and her diner became a destination not just for food but for hope, a reminder that small acts of kindness could lead to extraordinary change. And through it all, Maria stayed true to herself. She worked tirelessly, supported her staff, and gave back to the town that had always been her home. Each day, she welcomed customers with a warm smile, knowing that her diner wasn't just a business anymore. You gotta keep going because it's gonna be so rough when you feel like it's over. Nothing sustains me. It was a beacon of possibility. A year had passed since that snowy evening when everything changed. Maria stood by the window of her diner, gazing out at the bustling parking lot. A soft smile played on her lips. The once quiet eatery was now the heart of the town, alive with laughter, conversation, and the clinking of dishes. She thought about how far she had come. The diner wasn't just thriving, it was a beacon of hope. Her children, who once worried about making ends meet, were now dreaming big. Her eldest, Sophia, was applying for college, something Maria had once feared she could never afford. As Maria wiped down the counter, the familiar sound of a convoy pulling up made her pause. A hush fell over the room as the door swung open. There, standing in his signature suit and tie, was Donald Trump. "Maria!" Trump's voice boomed, his face breaking into a wide grin. Maria rushed forward, her heart pounding with gratitude and excitement. "Mr. Trump," she said, shaking his hand warmly, "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." I had to come back, Trump said, glancing around the bustling diner. I wanted to see how my favorite chef is doing. Maria chuckled, her eyes glistening. Thanks to you, we're better than ever. Trump looked around, taking in the lively atmosphere, the happy faces, and the framed photos of the diner's transformation that lined the walls. You did this, Maria, he said firmly. I may have helped, but this is all you. Tender fingers gently warmed her as she lowered. His affection made her oblivious to the cold. They sat at the counter, sharing a slice of Maria's famous apple pie. The room buzzed with excitement as customers snapped photos and whispered in awe. But for Maria, this moment wasn't about attention. It was about gratitude. So, my brother's again, yeah, and it sucks. It's the age and all songers, birth, binel. You changed my life, Maria said softly. Because of you, my children have a future. My diner has a purpose. Trump smiled, his expression genuine. It's what you deserved all along. Just promise me one thing. Keep inspiring others. I will, Maria said, her voice steady with determination. As Trump left the diner, the room erupted into applause. Maria stood by the door, watching him go, her heart full. Sometimes, she thought, a single moment of kindness can create waves that transform lives forever.